Welcome to Holly's Pandorium, featuring your host, psychic medium Holly Jordan.
Hi everyone, this is Holly from Holly's Pandorium, and I'm here today with a new friend. We can call him a professor, or we can call him Loyd Auerbach, but whatever we call him, Loyd is a very involved person in the paranormal field, and I say that in a very broad way. I had no idea about his extensive work in the paranormal, but the more I find out about Loyd, the more amazing I am with what he's done and what he does currently. So Loyd, if you would please welcome, and I'm glad you're here, and please share with us some information about the paranormal.
About the paranormal in general? Or...
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about.
Okay.
I'm open.
Well, I'm a parapsychologist. I'm in the field of parapsychology, which is the field of science that's been studying the paranormal since, well, officially we got started in 1882 with the founding of the Society for Psychical Research over in the UK, which is still in existence, and I highly encourage people to join. It's still very, very active. So we've been studying everything from apparitions and poltergeists to telepathy and precognition, other evidence of life after death, psychokinesis, which is mind over matter. You know, the paranormal, as it's described on television, what has come to be in the so-called paranormal field or community is really focused only on ghosts, on things like and hauntings.
Yes.
And that is a small piece of what the field of parapsychology actually studies.
Right.
And the problem, and it is a problem in some respects, is that a lot of folks are not aware that when you're studying ghosts and hauntings and poltergeists, you are looking at factors that should involve and do involve ESP, extrasensory perception, and mind over matter very often. I mean, a poltergeist case involves physical stuff. So it's kind of hard to study those cases unless you know something about PK. So, you know, when I talk about the paranormal in general, for me, it's a much, much broader category than just the ghostly stuff that I do focus on quite a bit.
Definitely. Now, can you share with us what brought you into this? I mean, parapsychology is not on the list of college curriculum that most people choose. Where did you get to this? How did you get into this?
Well, I mean, I got into it actually at a very young age. I mean, I know a lot of people that are interested in the subject because of TV and movies, or because of experiences. In my case, it was television, it was comic books and science fiction books. Nice. And all of that goes back to the fact that my dad worked for NBC, and I had a TV in my room when I was about 2. So I started, I mean, I'm a TV baby in some respects. So I think my first encounter with anything paranormal on TV was probably either Casper the Friendly Ghost, or a TV show called Topper, which was about a guy who lived in a house that had 2 very friendly ghosts who drank a lot. So it's a great show. You can actually find episodes on YouTube still out there and a lot of the free streaming services. But that also got me somewhat interested because of comic books and people's superpowers, the idea of psychic abilities. And then when I was about 12, because of I heard the word parapsychology on a TV show, that being Dark Shadows, I went to the library to look for books on parapsychology, and I found them. And they were books on the science of parapsychology, mainly by folks like J.B. Rhine and J.G. Pratt and Gertrude Schmeidler. I had already read ghost books by Hans Holzer for years, but now I actually discovered, and I was really interested in science as a kid. I discovered there really was a science studying this stuff. I had a parapsychology club that I started in high school with the help of 2 of my teachers, pretty popular club, and got to meet some New York area parapsychologists while I was a teenager. Actually did my first interview when I was a teenager on a late night show with a guy named Long John Neville, who found out about our parapsychology club. So, you know, I've been around, just to kind of step aside, I've been around television all my life. So that includes being behind the scenes because my dad was a producer and my uncle was a director. So before I really started doing TV in the early 80s, I knew a lot about television and how TV is made. So there's that comment. In college, I studied anthropology, cultural anthropology. And there are a lot of classes that Northwestern offered in the anthro department on beliefs in witchcraft, magic, sorcery, all those, fortune telling, all those things. So I took a lot of those. And then I met through a local college outside in Chicago, Mundelein College. One of the professors there was a parapsychologist, and he did a 6-week mini course, which I attended. And I met someone who pointed me towards JFK University, John F. Kennedy University in California, which at the time, from 1977 to 1987, there was a graduate parapsychology program. So I got my master's in parapsychology. Sadly, the program ended. I actually came back as a faculty member after graduating, but unfortunately, because of university politics and also funding, we lost a funding source due to the kind of Reaganomics economy in the 80s. That program, which was the only one in the country, ended.
I do believe that it's definitely something worth researching. I've been a lifelong psychic medium. And so for me, it's an absolute delight to find anyone that's researching these things. And I mean, there's been so much studying that's been done in the last 50 years even that debunks and kind of quantifies things that for me are normal and for me are regular. So
Yeah.
I appreciate any field of testing that basically legitimizes what to me is a natural experience.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You just said natural experience. Really, none of these things are paranormal. They're actually
For
normal.
me, they're not. Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
they may be rare for certain people, but there's a lot of experiences people have that are considered normal, that are extremely rare, like 1 in a million has them, and yet they're considered normal. And there are also effects that science has yet to explain, or has only recently explained. I mean, it hasn't been too long that we finally figured out in medical science how aspirin actually works. So there are a lot of things that science is still looking to find answers. I find it really funny sometimes talking to people in the paranormal who say that it must be dark matter or dark energy. It's like, do you know what that is? Because no one else does.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but isn't that still kind of the abyss of I don't know still? I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of an
Saul
interesting
Perlmutter,
story.
who won the Nobel Prize for he and several others for the expansion of the universe and why it was speeding up. He's the guy. His
Right.
team is who named dark energy. And I was at a press conference where he was talking, and a reporter asked, "So what is dark energy?" He said, "We're in the dark. It's kind of energy, but we're in the dark. We have no idea what it is." And the same thing goes for dark matter. So
Oh my goodness.
yeah, so we have to consider that there's a lot of things, especially in the physical universe, that we don't understand. But because parapsychology has been kind of shunted to the side so often,
Yes.
for a number of reasons, it really is kind of a stepchild. The Parapsychological Association has been a member science of the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences since 1969. But that apparently doesn't matter to the people who are disbelievers, the debunkers.
Agreed. Agreed. There's a lot of I find it very fascinating. There's a lot of people that unless it's tangible that they can grab and hold it and look at it like a lollipop, that this is here because I can see it and hold it and smell it and taste it and all that good stuff. I have a lot of people that I talk to that have experiences and they won't admit it publicly because of fear of shame or ridicule. And that I find that very sad because it has enriched my life to be involved in this part of our universe. And to me, and I'm glad you agree with it being natural because I don't believe that it's ever not been. The more I study it, the more I find that in history, there's fragments of it, but there's pieces of history that show that this has been part of our daily life for generations.
Well, when you take an anthropological approach, you do find examples in indigenous cultures. You find them in history. They're there. phenomena, the experiences, the abilities have been there. Kings
Right.
and queens and leaders of countries and warlords have relied on psychic advisors for thousands of years.
Yes.
And
Yes.
granted, there are some phonies out there. There's no question
Of
about
course.
that. But it's something that is absolutely very, very real. And it just, going back to your statement that people won't talk about it, there were a number of years that I was commuting from here. I live in the East Bay of San Francisco, the Bay Area, and I was commuting into San Francisco. And we had for a while, we have our BART trains that go in, our trains that go,
Right.
commuter trains. But there was a period where there was something called casual carpooling, very common,
Right.
where people would park at the BART station. You'd get online, you'd hop in someone's car so they could go through the carpool lane to avoid traffic. And I got to know several of the people online, and we would often ride in together with some new driver.
Sure.
And the people I got friendly with, knowing what I did, would often ask me to see how the driver would react. So,
Oh,
Loyd, had any good ghost cases lately? And you talked to any good psychics lately? And inevitably, every one of those drivers would ask me questions and start talking about a psychic experience or a ghost experience. And
yes.
and this is the same with groups of lawyers and other groups that I would meet in other ways.
I believe
And
it.
I would ask them, have you ever told this to anybody? Well, no, people think I'm weird. And there have been times that I've been at parties and I talked to a guy, and then I met his wife later on and I'm talking to her and she tells me a story. I said, have you told this to anybody? She said, no. I said, I think you need to talk to your husband,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they both had experiences they were not even admitting to the other. And it's just incredibly sad. It's really
It
sad.
is. It is because I've encountered that as well. I have some lovely neighbors that are in their 80s, and we were having coffee. My husband and I were visiting with them the other night, and they both had ghost experiences from very different times and very different locations before they were married. And it was fascinating to watch their expressions, listening to each other share. It was like, wow. I mean, they
Yeah,
had no idea. And, they've been married for years, but it just never came up. It was just not a topic of conversation. And
right.
what fun we had sharing their stories between the two of them and sharing other stories that we had. I mean, it was really kind of fun. It was a very lovely evening. I wish more people could do that.
Yeah. And in some cultures, they can. It's just, Western culture, we're so bound up in, it actually comes at it from both ends. We have the very loud and vocal people who call themselves skeptics, who are really cynics or
Yes.
disbelievers. In our field, we call them pseudo skeptics because they're phony
Okay.
skeptics.
Okay.
They're not really skeptical. And then on the other side, you have the the true believers, whether they believe in everything paranormal without any question whatsoever, or if they believe, if they have deeply held religious beliefs, and
Right.
they've been told for whatever reason these things are evil. Um, and then of course you have a lot of people in between who watch a lot of movies and reality shows and get freaked out when they even think about these things.
Yes. Yes. And I do find that fascinating because I have found that as well, that there's a large group of people that enjoy the reality TV series that discuss the paranormal or paranormal like events. But when asked, well, what would you do in that situation? I would be scared to death. I'd run, I'd move, I'd leave the house. I'd do all of the, it's fine as long as it's behind a screen, as long
Right.
as it's not in their face.
Well, and those
And
shows unfortunately take a very dark look or negative look
yes, yes.
at the experiences. If there've
Well,
been a few with mediums, like Kim Russo and a couple other people,
yeah,
who and John Edward, which is more of a positive type thing. And
yes,
actually, I think John Edwards crossing over really kind of allowed people to admit or start seeing mediums. It actually led to, the popularity of mediums in the early 2000s helped us found my colleagues found the Forever Family Foundation, which supports the work of spirit mediums and tests them also as well,
nice.
certifies them.
Well, that's really neat. Can you tell us some more about that?
Yeah, Forever Family Foundation was founded, I think, around 2004 by a couple that had lost their daughter in a car crash,
Oh my.
and very very tragic. She was a teenager,
Oh,
And oddly enough, one of their neighbors was seeing a medium, and apparently Bailey, the daughter, came through that medium to give a message to Bob and Fran.
nice.
Bob was extremely skeptical. They did see the medium several times, but over time, because of the specific information about Bailey's personality, her day-to-day activity, all sorts of things, Bob was convinced that this was genuine. And most importantly, they both got incredible relief from grief
Right.
in the process.
Yeah.
So they got together with other couples that had either lost kids or parents or siblings, and they brought in some scientists because they really wanted to approach this from also a science-based process. Working with the initial medium and a few others, they worked up a protocol to test them to see if they really could provide evidence, actually not just factual, but emotional and other kinds of evidence, and started this all volunteer nonprofit organization called the Forever Family Foundation, which currently runs 4 grief retreats. In fact, I think they just finished one in Connecticut. Oh no, Florida, just this past weekend. Um,
Wow.
we have one in California. We're doing 2 in Connecticut, and they are focused on grief relief with the mediums, a grief therapist who also is interested in life after death evidence, and typically Bob or someone else, and myself when it's California, we give kind of the scientific perspective on all this as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a free organization for people to join. It's an amazing organization. So I encourage people to join that. It's just foreverfamilyfoundation.org.
Wow. I'm going to have to look into that some more because I've done a lot of my own personal work with people for dealing with grief and
Yeah,
connecting with spirit after. And it's, from family members to pets. Um, Connecting with the afterlife is a gift. And it is amazing the peace and just getting that last moment, just that last brief contact, you know, that uh, there's something very special about that, but there's also something very endearing for people to carry with them, that it gives them hope that there is still a link,
right,
that they're not
right.
cut off from this person or this pet, this loved one. And I find it a blessing. I mean, I feel super blessed that I get to talk to people in the afterlife all the time. That to me is a delight. I have conversations with the afterworld, and I have some local spirits that like to hang out, and they actually told me this last year that they would prefer to be called living adjacent because
I
they're
like that.
not dead.
Right,
They're
right.
they're living adjacent to us. They're in our world in their own way. And so
Yeah,
I love that term.
it's yeah. I mean, our general term for studying this evidence is survival of bodily death, not life
Oh,
after death.
wow. I love
Survival
that.
of bodily death,
Okay.
because
I
we're
love
talking
that.
about consciousness surviving. So they're still
Yes.
alive. They're just alive in a different form.
Yes. Well, and I have a friend that's a scientist, and like she likes to say, and I love this, energy never dies. It always is there. It can't die.
No,
And
but it
so if
can
you,
transform.
yes. And so the idea to me, I survived a very severe heart attack 13 years ago. And I learned then that our brain and our hearts make electricity. And
Yeah.
so that's energy. Well, that has to be somewhere when the body doesn't support it anymore. So where does it go? And to me, that's a logical conversation and an easy conclusion because of my experience. But for many people, there's an abyss, there's a nothing after death. And that's unfortunate because there's a lot more after.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people I know who are disbelievers that they're fine with there not being anything. I think some of them actually think that it's better that there's nothing, um,
Yes, I
given
agree.
the way
Yes.
But what kind of bugs me sometimes is how some of those folks, and I've had conversations with them, and they're materialists. I mean, it's a philosophical thing, an approach that also
Yeah.
pervades science in many
Right.
respects. How it bothers them that people believe that there might be something else. That it's like, why does that bother you? I can believe, and maybe my late colleague Gertrude Schmeidler used to say that life after death, that exists, survival, is something that will, we in parapsychology look toward it existing. We'll never know if we're wrong, because if there's nothing, we won't know if we're wrong, if we're right. But, somebody like George Carlin, who didn't believe in anything,
Right.
when he died, he would have found out he was wrong
Right.
if he survived. So
Yes,
yeah,
I agree. It's kind of like the Schrodinger's cat situation. You don't really
yeah.
know. It's both all the time. Um, Genuinely, I have a philosophy about why people are so afraid of it that I'll share with you. So, I was raised in a Catholic Presbyterian household. And so I have learned over time that most of the people that are concerned about the afterlife or don't want to go there is because they have that Puritan value of measurement after death, that somehow we're graded like a horrible school marm is going to
Right.
interact with us and grade our life and bring forth all of our fails and all of our mistakes and measure us somehow. And what I love to share with people is that no, that's not part of the experience. It's about a lot of love and a lot of connection with others that have passed on. And I currently do seances once a week and I help connect souls constantly. And it is absolutely the most beautiful experience to have souls that are reluctant to pass on. And some I understand. I had a soul not too long ago that was a young man that died before his 18th birthday. And he had had this very picturesque childhood until he lost his mom. And his 17th year of life was traumatic and tragic and awful because he lost his mom and his dad kind of went by the wayside. And so in his talking to me, he shared that I don't want to go on to another life. I just want to stay here because
Hmm.
all I know about life was good and happy, and going to the afterlife is too much. And I think that when people think about the afterlife, they perceive that there's something imbalanced that they won't be able to manage or they won't be able to handle because of lack of information. And so your job and your work to me is priceless, because if we can quantify some of it or get at some level, give people some peace of mind and let them know that there's nothing to fear, I would love that. I would love for more people
Yeah.
to know that it's not something to be afraid of.
Well, part of it is that people always ask what the afterlife is like. They ask the mediums that at our Forever Family
Yeah,
Foundation events.
yeah,
And you get this kind of, I don't know if you've had a description from your spirits on the other side or not, but the way I look at it, and I kind of explain this to people, I said, people are afraid of the unknown. That's
yes,
really, it's not just judgment. I
correct.
think it's also the fact that they're taught there's so many different religious ideas of what the afterlife is like. And then there's so many new age ideas what the afterlife is like.
Yes,
And
there's a
I have
lot.
to
Yeah,
always say, look, this is kind of like science fiction. You're in a different state of existence.
yes,
The only way spirits can communicate anything back about the afterlife is using words or concepts that we living people understand. So
correct.
my guess is that the afterlife is more different than we can imagine, but
Yes,
in a good way.
yes, I would agree.
Um, yeah, the judgment thing. Many of the mediums I've talked to over the years have talked about, what they say to people in the large group gatherings and other things is the only judging is going to be you. You're going to judge yourself.
Yeah,
You're going to kind of see that replay of your life,
yeah,
and you have to accept yourself.
yeah,
That's the only judgment.
yeah. But that's a relief for some people. That's like,
Yeah, it
the
should be
old
a
Egypt.
relief. Yeah,
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 well, the old Egyptian idea of here's this amazing God that meets you to pass you over, and they take a feather and weigh your soul. That's
yeah,
scary. That's a
yeah.
very old concept, to
It
weigh and
is.
balance that your soul can be light as a feather because you're an honest soul, or heavy and no, you get to go down the wrong way. I
Right,
mean,
right.
that's very intimidating. That's scary, and those
Yeah,
stories have been for a long time.
yeah. It's what we know from the people who have near death experiences is that there are very, very few negative ones.
Yes.
And those negative ones tend to be from people who have a lot of fear about the afterlife
That's
and
very
who
true.
grew up in a religion that basically said, you're going to hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
So their own beliefs are influencing a little bit of that too.
I do believe that. I do believe that because most of the time people, and I had my own near death experience that was very positive, but I know what you're talking about because I've talked with a few people that their experience kind of scared them forward into a different mindset.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that that was orchestrated for them in particular, or because most of what I've encountered in afterlife stuff is incredibly blissful. It's not just comforting or nice, it's unconditional love 24/7. There's all
Yep.
joy and all love.
Yep.
So, yeah, I feel for people that have something else happen because I don't know why that is. I wish I could explain that, but other than
Yeah. Well, I mean, we
just
have
protect
researchers
them.
trying to figure that out. That's one of
Yeah,
the things that we are research. We do research in our
exactly.
field.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
good
I
to
mean,
know.
we have a wide range, and I think a lot of people, especially when I've talked to ghost hunters, they seem to think that they don't even know the word parapsychology, which is unfortunately not the case. The TV shows made a distinct effort, especially ghost hunters, made a distinct effort to avoid any mention of parapsychology whatsoever. And then there was this idea that parapsychologists only work in the laboratory, which is completely false, actually. Um, and the thing is that when we are studying, we have such a range of things we study, even in the idea of survival. We have near death experiences. We even look at out of body experiences to see, because those should suggest that consciousness can leave the body for a time. We look at obviously the apparition or ghost phenomena, because that's consciousness without a body. And there's flavors of that. I mean, there are apparitions of living people that
Yes.
happen every once in a while. And then we look at mediumship, communication processes, things like that. I mean, we do look at ITC and any sort of technological type of thing. And then we also look at reincarnation cases from the perspective of children who remember previous lives, little kids, not
That's
past life
fascinating.
regression. We don't do the hypnosis thing, but there's so much of a mound of evidence that altogether shows that there's something about consciousness surviving. Anyway, there's so much evidence that unfortunately still doesn't convince a materialist who believes that the brain is it. So, and really what it boils down to, though, is when you look at the evidence, it is your starting point. Do you accept that it's possible that consciousness can be different than brain? Because if you don't accept that, then there's no point showing you the evidence. Even people in my field who are materialists look at the evidence and they find an ESP explanation, not a survival explanation.
So, as a parapsychologist, can you tell us um, how you get cases to work on? How does that come to fruition, and what do you do? What's your
Well,
procedure?
I can tell you what it used to be like.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
with the explosion of ghost hunting groups and frankly, wild claims on websites and things,
right.
we rarely get cases these days. I mean, it is the case. I'm working with one of my students. So I teach classes for the Rhine Education Center. That's
Okay,
part of the Rhine Research Center. And the Rhine, that's RHINE, it's named after J.B. Rhine, the father of modern parapsychology. Still has a working laboratory, a lot of educational opportunities. And we do about to do a class starting in February on field investigation. So I have
okay,
a lot of students who have graduated, some who have gone through a full certificate program. I've got kind of a network of potential investigators. Some of them
okay,
get, a lot of them get their cases locally, however they advertise.
hmm,
And we're about to eventually, in the next couple of months, we're going to launch a website for the public that hopefully will bring more cases in.
nice.
So my cases are pretty rare these days, especially since the pandemic. But I do get emails from people asking for help, and I farm them out because most of the time they're not local here in the Bay Area.
Sure,
That's always been the case, in fact. But I only send them out to people who, or farm them out to people who I know what they're doing, which
gotcha.
is, yeah, which is really important. Um, I teach my students to work with psychics and mediums, which is something obviously not everybody can do because they can't always find somebody.
Right. Of course.
But we also have classes in how to figure out if somebody really is genuinely psychic or medium is a medium and so on.
Nice.
The biggest problem, honestly, when I get emails is that people, it drives me crazy. Sometimes people will ask for help and never put where they are.
Oh,
Not even their phone number.
okay.
We have this and such and such going on in our house. Can you come out? It's like, sure. Where are you?
Right.
You know, and the difference between us in our field, people trained in parapsychology and ghost hunters in general, is ghost hunters will often jump on a case without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
If it's logistically possible. We need to have a pre-interview because I find that a lot of the calls that I've gotten over the years, people had a genuine experience with a ghost or a genuine poltergeist experience or a genuine, at least that's what it seems like.
Correct.
But the last time anything happened was 2 years ago. So does that mean, I can interview you on the phone, I'll talk to you about what it might have been, how it might have worked, but is the ghost still around?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no evidence of that. And the same goes, by the way, for some of those haunted places that ghost hunters go to that are advertised as haunted. I know of places that had no phenomena for decades because nobody was there.
Correct.
In the place, and they just assumed it was haunted. And now we have a concern, some of us, that ghost hunters are actually going to leave imprints behind and haunt the place themselves.
Oh, good grief. That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, I had not even thought of that. I do have some friends that do research in New York, and there's actually been a trend starting there where homeowners have been suing ghost hunters for creating issues in their homes. That they contact them to help them deal with something and end up leaving it worse than when they got there. And so there's a very significant group of people that are genuine and honest about what they're doing and there to help. And then there's, of course, people that are not. They're out there to get numbers on their web pages or their social media. And it's hard to know who to trust and who not to trust. So if you were a consumer looking to get assistance, what would be a couple things you would suggest people look out for when they hire a ghost research team, if that's their issue?
So first thing I would ask is, what's your method? How are you working? All right. How are you going to help us? That's an important thing.
Yes,
and that may be the most important thing. And then actually the homeowners, they should just simply say, look, I really don't care about evidence. I don't care about EVPs. I don't care about what you get with your devices at all. And I'll just say that just flat out that there's no ghost hunting device that can detect ghosts. So there's a lot of crap being sold to the ghost hunting community, but they should basically say that I don't care about the evidence. Either you find an explanation that's not paranormal, or you help us deal with the paranormal, and that's it. That's important. They should also consider that if they guarantee, this is important, if they guarantee getting rid of something, then get it in writing, because then you really can't sue them if nothing happens.
Yeah, because
it really is, because there's a science here. We apply the science that we've learned over the years, and we've had extreme success in helping people.
Right.
But the fact is that there's a piece of this that even if you figure out that the ghost is gone, let's say that I've got you as a medium with me and we move the ghost or get the ghost out of the house, if not move the ghost on, if there is actually a ghost, they're still traumatized from the experience. Even if the experience was a friendly ghost, there's still trauma. Yes. So we typically suggest counseling of some kind. Definitely not a psychologist unless there's psychological issues.
Right.
But talking to people, a transpersonal therapist or counselor does help. Poltergeist activity happens if there's physical activity in your house and that's all there is.
Right.
We are going to approach this from the perspective that one of you is doing it without realizing it. And we have to work from that perspective. So I would ask also, what's the difference between a ghost, a haunting, what they call residual hauntings on TV, and a poltergeist case? And the one thing I'd also say is if they mention the D word, the demon word, call somebody else right off the bat. Because they will find a demon in your home, regardless of what's actually going on.
Yeah, that's a rough one. That's a rough one. I
Yeah.
I have encountered them a couple of times but in 50 years, a couple. So most 99.8% is nothing bad. Most of the
Right.
time it's something positive. And just it's like I tell people, there are happy people and sad people. And so there are people in the afterlife that are not happy, they're miserable, and maybe they just want to share their story. Maybe that's how they exist. That's their function right now, and that's where they're at. But it doesn't mean that they're a demon, and it doesn't mean that they're out to harm you. That's just how they do their thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a couple of cases over the years where the ghosts, when they were alive, they were bullies.
Yeah.
And so they had one case years ago where the ghost was wandering around because nobody could see him, and then he finds someone who was a somewhat psychic, and
Right.
he started harassing her verbally.
Oh no.
And she was smart enough to know that this wasn't demonic at all,
Right.
just an a-hole, so to speak.
Right.
Uh,
That's funny.
and we worked out a way to get rid of him,
Good.
but which partly involved with her kind of like standing up to him, because stand up to a bully kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was not evil. I mean, the whole idea of evil out there is it's a production of it really is from TV. It is from movies. It makes, that's why there are so many horror films
Right.
of this type, and that's why the ghost hunting shows decided to have that sort of thing. That whole evil thing is to get ratings because people love to be scared.
Well, the shock and awe factor. It's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
nauseating, but that's like the thing. Everything is shock and awe.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that there are some people that are finally fighting back and trying to sue. I've
They
actually
need
worked.
to.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with. I have a day job, and I work as an kind of with information, online information, and I've worked a lot with law firms and lawyers over the years, and even met a few judges, and so I have a little bit of an insight onto the legal side of things and what one can do and what can't do, and what
Right.
one should do and what should not promise. And there have already been ghost hunting groups that have been arrested for trespassing. One group was caused a fire.
Oh,
Yeah. So, and then I talked one group out of, they were going to drive around Sacramento, and one of them was supposedly a sensitive, and I doubt she was really even psychic. And they were going to drive around in suburban neighborhoods, and if she felt that the house they drove by was haunted, they were going to knock on the door and offer a ghost hunting service. And
really?
I was able to convince them through someone else that they're likely to get shot,
Yeah.
or these days shot, but definitely sued, because
Yeah.
you can't label a house as haunted. That'll affect its value.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yes.
there's a monetary thing that can get them sued. There was another group that decided they were so excited about a case that they got. It didn't matter that the people who called them said that they were meth users and that they had a meth lab in the basement. They were going to go on the case anyway. And somebody who used to be with their group called me to ask for advice on what to tell them. I said, well, tell them if the cops show up, saying you're a ghost hunter is not going to get you out of jail.
Yep. Well, and see, that's the thing. I just entered into working with a ghost research team in Oregon, and I mean, people of varying degrees of experience. I mean, some people on the team have 20 years, some people have 2 years. It's very, very vast. But several of them have stories about in the pre-interview process coming into exposure with people that are under influences of illegal drug substances,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
their imaginations have gone bonkers bananas, and that's scary. I mean, it's not just genuine people that are having a problem. I had a couple contacted me a few years ago, and they sent me audio and video. They just had a baby, and they kept hearing these noises that were freaking them out, and they were sure that their apartment was haunted. And I did a little work looking and listening, and it was their refrigerator dropping ice. And it was just rattling. It was an old refrigerator, and they had moved in while she was pregnant. And in all the hustle and bustle and unpacking, they didn't hear the noise at night. They were passing out and falling asleep. But when the baby came, they were being more sensitive to sounds because it would wake the baby up. And
Sure.
so literally it was just an appliance that was causing all the stress.
Well,
But they were scared.
we find so many normal explanations for at least
Yeah.
part of these cases, even the
Oh,
best
sure.
cases we have.
Right.
There was actually, first thing I want to mention is the group in Oregon. Let
Yeah.
them know that I'm going to be speaking at the Oregon Ghost Conference
I will be there too.
the week. Will you? Okay, great. So yeah, I'll be speaking there.
Nice.
But I was going to say that there was a real estate company shortly after the lockdowns. They did a survey because people were complaining about to their realtors that their houses were haunted.
Oh.
And there was a survey done, actually 2 surveys that were done, that found that a large percentage of people, much larger than anybody had ever had before, were reporting that their house was haunted, house or apartment was haunted.
Okay.
During the lockdown. This comes from the lockdown.
Interesting.
So the realtors, knowing a little something here, recognized that, number one, the younger you were, the more likely you were to say that. Folks who are much older realized that what was going on was they were hearing the normal noises of day-to-day house settling and all sorts of stuff. But folks who had never been trapped in their homes for 24 hours a day for weeks on end had never noticed these things before, like the refrigerator, and they thought the house place was haunted.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that after the lockdown, people were calling ghost hunting groups asking for investigations. And probably, whether there was a ghost there or not, some of those groups found evidence.
Yeah.
Because they always do.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, the thing I always tell people is, because even on the phone, when my pre-interviews are on the phone, partly because ghosts don't carry guns and knives, but living people do.
Yes, very good point.
So I talk to them about the idea that when you have an experience that freaks you out, especially a real experience,
right,
or even a perceived one, you're more sensitive to things around the house that you never noticed before. And you're going to include those as part of the case.
Yeah.
So I usually tell them to think about all the different things that they've experienced, write them all down, and then look for an explanation for any or all of them. Let's talk about the main thing. And then we kind of go in through that. And so when we go in and do investigations, one of the key elements is to ask them every little thing that happened, where did it happen, and to first look for an explanation that's more normal. And then we have the paranormal left, and then we can study that.
Right. Because that's definitely been conversations I've had with other people working in the field, and that is to ask people that are coming forward saying, I think I have, or maybe this, or maybe that. Documentation, write it all down. And it makes me think of when you go to the doctor and they're saying you've got a health issue. Well, what have you been eating? And when are you sleeping? And they want you to write down what you've been eating and what you've been doing with yourself. And this is no different. We're looking for answers. So we need all the information we can get. And I love that because it's not something we want to play with, and it's not TV, and it would be really nice to have more legitimacy and more respect, but I think it's coming in time. And I think that the more conversations we have, it'll get there. I mean, we seem to have a little bit of an awakening to the conversation over the last 10 years, I think, but it's very slow and tedious. It's not a fluid progression upward, but there is a steadiness. I'm noticing that there's a little bit more reception. And I do think people are traveling in circles of understanding and interest. And the more people talk and share and do events like the Oregon Ghost Conference, I love that. I went to that for the first time in 23, and I met an enormous amount of people that I consider family now, that have similar thoughts and beliefs that I do. And what a relief to go somewhere and be able to talk openly about the paranormal and not feel like it's weird, because
Right.
everyone's
That's
there with the same idea.
right.
Yeah, to share.
That's a
And
really
so,
that's a really good thing. The one thing I'd actually say though, is a lot of those conferences are focused on TV personalities.
oh, really?
Yeah, there's a lot of ghost conferences where, the main focus is somebody from one or more of the TV shows,
Oh,
and they're many of them, while people can talk about the paranormal, they become like sci-fi conventions or Star Trek conventions. They're fan conventions. They're not really about the work or about what's going on, unfortunately. I mean, there's usually somebody there who's talking that way, but
right.
having encountered situations over the years where I had two instances where somebody said to me, "Why would I listen to you? You don't have a TV series."
Oh,
And that kind of attitude, unfortunately, is out there. I've gotten emails like that too. So,
yeah.
it happens.
But you have to understand the mentality of where that's coming from. And that's, if that's all the better they can do with their thoughts, then, oh, bless them. I mean, if that's
Right.
all they can go do,
But that's the kind of person that's getting sued in New York City.
very likely. Yeah,
Yeah.
very likely. I'm grateful that there are more people doing things like what you're doing. And I'm grateful that I've gotten to come out in public and say what I am.
Sure.
I started a psychic page during the pandemic only because people were so miserable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I found that, I used a fake name because I was scared, because I've had malicious attacks from people. And yeah, it's, I either get a very warm reception or extremely distasteful.
Mhm.
and
Right.
and I get it. I mean, it's not for everybody. It's not something that everyone understands or wants to, which I appreciate that, and I do understand. But it's evolved for me just in 3 years. I finally got the nerve last year to put my real legal name on my psychic page, and that was a big step. I mean, I'm
Sure.
60 years old, and I'm just now being brave with it. Um, I've been psychic since I was a little kid, and
It's
only
there's our
a
culture.
handful
Our
of
culture
my
is
family wish I had it. Yeah.
our
I'm
culture
sorry.
makes things difficult. Our culture makes things difficult.
It does. It does. And I'm amazed that in watching things from, say, from India, and the wide reception and openness to reincarnation, it
Right.
just is such a blessing to me to see story after story of little kids under the age of 5 sharing with mom and dad, well, I used to live here and this was my name and that was my husband's name and that were my children's name, and even going to the effect of getting to connect with people. It's amazing to me. That's
It
brilliant.
really is. Yeah. I mean,
I,
the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies has been studying those kinds of cases since 1960.
I love
And
that.
Jim Tucker's the big guy in that subject matter these days. I mean, they have so much information on their website, which is really great. But basically, there are these incredible cases like what you just mentioned,
Yeah.
which honestly, I've got a colleague of mine who was the head of the US government Stargate program for a number of years, very much a materialist. I just had lunch with him the other day. We
Yeah.
talk about survival a little bit. He's very much materialist, but he's actually said that he cannot fathom how what the explanation could be for these little kids remembering or coming up with this information,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it goes so far beyond ESP, the
Yeah.
way we've, even in the best of circumstances,
Right.
that he is one of the few true materialists who really have pushed for more study of that kind of situation. Interestingly enough, Carl Sagan, who absolutely thought ESP didn't exist, actually in one of his books posted that that was one of the things parapsychology provided that no other field was looking at and really should. This is one of those mysteries that, how come nobody's looking at it?
Yeah. So I actually read a book that I don't know if you've heard of this or not. There's a lady named Julia Ingram that was a psychiatrist in Portland. She's retired now, and she wrote a book called The Lost Sisterhood, and it was
Yeah.
about a patient that she had years ago that came in that was having physical troubles with lupus and ended up getting all this psychology done and all these visits because the doctors that were in the medicine side of her life were not finding explanations that could explain or help understand the trauma that she had been through and her reaction to medicine and so on. And so Julia was trying to fill the gap and help this woman with her healing adventure. And in doing so, she ended up with past life things popping through. And what was incredible is this woman shared this incredible story of a past life where she had been in love with someone. It was in Victorian times, and her father was a governor of some area. She'd sailed to this area, and anyway, long story short, the person she was supposed to marry died 7 months after they got engaged, and she literally died of a broken heart and had carried that into her current life. And once she was able to connect with that memory, it was closure, and it actually helped her to experience less body pain and less. It's hard to explain. I'm not doing it justice, I'm afraid, but it's a wonderful thing to see what happens. I actually became a certified clinical hypnotherapist a few years ago. And so I've done past life regressions with people, and I've had my own past life regressions done. It's very enlightening, and it's amazing what comes out.
Yeah.
It's very hard to explain.
I will tell you that the way we look at past life regression is as therapy. It is one of the most powerful tools. Past life regression therapy is one of the most powerful brief therapy tools that seems to exist out there. So you have a 3-year-old. Yeah. They don't have a lot of historical or otherwise. Yeah. But there are some really, a friend of mine who's one of my colleagues in parapsychology, he's a hypnotherapist, and he's done tens of thousands of past life regressions.
Nice.
And he told me it was something like 1 in 500 provided enough basic information the individual could not possibly have known, because he had to go research it at the UCLA library, that really had, some evidential value. But that doesn't matter, because the other 499 and that one got a lot of relief out of that past life regression.
And that's the point. Exactly. And I appreciate you quantifying it that way, because the mind is fascinating. Our brains are incredible. And I don't know how all of it works. I would love to know. It would be great to measure and balance and say, oh, that's what that is, or that's that frequency, or that's that color, whatever it is, to help measure and understand it. But I think that's because we would like to make sense of it all. And I don't know that we ever will completely, but it would be great if we could, because I believe that if people could experience what I experience as a medium and a psychic, they would feel better. I'm one of the happiest people. I hear this all the time. Holly, you're always happy. You have this positive attitude. And it's like, because I have a lot of peace and I have a lot of love inside of me for everybody, because I have a connection that I can't really explain, but there's a sense of awe to life to me, and all life, and living adjacent and current life. And so I would love for more people to feel what I feel and to know what I know, because I think we'd enjoy what we have more if the burden of death wasn't so heavy.
No, I think you're right. That certainly seems to be the case for a lot of people who have near-death experiences.
Yeah.
The thing is, because people ask me about life after death, and I do believe certainly that I'm going to continue, but I'm not in a hurry to get there.
Right. That's fair. That's totally
I think
fair.
it's because I'm enjoying things here in life, and I think that that's the key factor. And really, no one should rush to that point either, no matter how great you think it's going to be in the afterlife. Not that you're going to be disappointed, but that's not why we're here. I mean, part of why we may actually have a body at all is to experience life as in the physical reality. So that's really important to keep in mind.
And I do want to share too, one of the most important conversations I've ever had with people about life after death is people that have been suicidal and feel like that's an answer or a solution. And what I share is that if you think life is hard enough with a body, having the same mental thoughts without a body to solve those issues with is much harder. And
Yeah.
there are ways to get help and ask for help now and figure it out, because there wouldn't be anything worse than coming back and having to do it over because you didn't figure it out.
Good point.
And so that's a wow, you know. But that's one of the things I find in some of the ghost connections that I have is they have unfinished business. They have questions and they have things they'd like to say, and those opportunities are missed or gone. Yeah, do what you can now while you can, because it's precious. It
Right.
really
Right.
is.
Yeah. Life is definitely precious.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So what are some of the projects that you're working on right now? Can you share anything that you've got upcoming?
Yeah, I can share one thing that this weekend, I believe, as long as Amazon doesn't kick it back, I'm going to be relaunching my paranormal casebook.
Nice.
So it's been out of print for over 10 years at this point. So I'm just waiting now for the proof copies, and once they're approved, it'll be in print in paperback this
Nice.
weekend.
Very
So
cool.
so by the 20th or 21st, it should be available. Although sometimes it takes Amazon 3 days once it's approved to kind of get it out there, and then a week later, I should have it up on Kindle, and it should be available eventually in Nook and other ebook formats. So that's one project. I've got 3 classes coming up for the Ryan Education Center. I'm doing a basic field investigations class, so kind of ghost hunting 101 from a science perspective. I'm doing a course on dreams and altered states of consciousness,
Nice.
during which we'll talk about the connection between all of those states and being psychic. And then I'm doing a 4-week class looking specifically at assessing technology and sensor equipment and things like that you would use in paranormal investigation. So there's 2 8-week classes, 1 4-week class. And then I've got I've got the Oregon Ghost Conference. I've got a couple other, I've got a book in process, slowly but surely, based on a class I've taught for the Rhine, which is promoting the paranormal to the public, teaching people how to talk about it so they don't think you're weird. Focusing on also including things about how to write about it, how to get published, self-publishing, public speaking, all of those things.
Well,
But really it's about communicating based on all my experience, because I've done, I mean, if I just do TV, I've done hundreds of TV shows, local and national, thousands of radio shows and podcasts, and then other interviews over the years in my career. And I also have my, behind the scenes stuff from the production perspective of television, and all of that's going in there as well. Kind of teaching people what it's really like, because reality TV ain't real.
it's just so fun. People are so
It bores, I have to tell you, reality TV bores the heck out of me. I just cannot watch those shows
yeah.
for the most part, especially knowing what I know.
Right.
Even something simple as just kind of as a non-paranormal example, if people really think that everything that happens in Real Housewives is totally candid, the way it actually happened, they're wrong.
Right.
There might have been a fight, but it was nothing like it showed on TV, because that was the director almost certainly asked them to redo it with more emotion, more hair pulling, or whatever else.
Right.
So
that's very true. Okay, so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So for someone that, let's say, has a paranormal experience, what would you say to them to encourage them to discuss it or share it?
I guess it depends on who they're going to share it with. And they should also know, I think the first thing to do is if they don't know the people they're talking to well enough to know what they think about psychic phenomena or the paranormal in general, I think what they want to do is ask them. So, what do you think about psychics? What do you think about, have you ever had an ESP experience? Just kind of curious. I've seen some stuff on TV. You can always kind of defer it and say somebody else, you got a friend who had an experience. Somebody told you about that, but find out what they're, because if they are an absolute, that stuff doesn't exist, you're going to be wasting your breath. honestly.
Right.
If there is somebody who thinks, oh, well, that stuff is really evil, you're going to be wasting your breath.
Right.
So, yeah. So even if they're not interested, if they have no thoughts, I think the best people are the people I never think about that. Why? Well, I had this experience of people that you might call paranormal. You can kind of couch it in those terms, but find the people who either are open to it, believe in it, um, but also you want to make sure that when you talk about your experience, you just know that people are going to say, "Weren't you scared?" And just be willing to say, "No. Why would I be scared?"
Right. So, with all the work that you've done, Loyd, you've done a lot. What are you most proud of today?
I think I'm proud of all the students I've taught over the years. And that includes people not only in my classes, but the people who've read my books, who have taken to heart some of the information in it, and the people I've turned on or opened up to the idea that we're all a little bit psychic, and
Sure.
this stuff is stuff that's something to be looking forward to, not to be afraid of.
Right. Right. And then my last question for you today is going to be, I think, my favorite question. What are you most excited about or most curious about in the paranormal today?
Um, Boy, I have such broad interests. It's really tough to pin that down.
Well, it doesn't have to
Um,
be one thing. Just give me your list. What's your list of things you're curious about?
Ultimately, I'm curious about this idea that ghost hunters may be leaving their own imprints behind.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about that. We have to
Yeah.
figure out a way to study that. I am curious and have an idea for an experiment as to whether or not it's when people experience residual hauntings, whether that is related to the Earth's magnetic field, which we have some evidence for. And if so, is that a psychic thing or is that a brain Earth thing? Is that something that's actually biological that we
Right.
can actually have a thought about how we might be able to pump up the volume, so to speak, on those things? And then I'm just always interested in um, the way that the pop culture. I mean, for me, it's really about connection to pop culture, trying to um, continue to shift the popular ideas about ESP, psychokinesis, survival, to where people are at least considering that these questions, that so many people have these experiences. Why are we not studying them? I mean, I have no problem with disbelievers studying it if they studied it and didn't immediately decide that, well, that was an anomaly, that didn't really happen. They wouldn't throw the evidence away, that
Right.
they'd actually pass it along to someone else.
That's great. That's great. Now, if someone wanted to get one of your books or get in contact with you for a class, what's the best way for people to reach you?
So the books are on Amazon. All the books that are in print are on Amazon. Still have a couple others that are out of print that I got to bring back into print. That's the best way. Just make sure that you spell my name correctly. Although I think if you spell it with two L's on Amazon, it'll still take you to me.
Yeah.
Um, I'm pretty much the only Loyd Auerbach. I have a couple of paranormal mystery novels also that I've co-authored. Got a third one coming out later this year.
Oh, fun.
Um, yeah, so folks can actually email me, and you can email me at P-R-O-F as in professor, paranormal@gmail.com. People can reach me that way. They can reach me through the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com @Ask Professor Paranormal. I do every other week live Q&A. The next one comes up on the 21st of January and then the 4th of February, the next two in the evening. And then also through my Facebook author page, which is just facebook.com/Loyd.Auerbach.author. For the Rhine classes, if you go to Rhine, RHINE.org, and you'll see a tab that says education, and that'll take you to the education center. And you can see the classes that I'm offering, that other folks are offering, coming up starting in February. Our next session after that will be May.
Nice. That's wonderful. I just have to say, Loyd, I appreciate your time today, and you have been a wonderful guest. You have so much good information, and I look forward to seeing you at the Oregon Ghost Conference. That
Yeah,
is
I
going
look
to be a
forward to it all.
blast. I'll have to
Great.
come find you. Um,
I'm doing a 6 p.m. presentation the first day, and then I'm doing a mentalism show after that. So,
Fun. Oh, that sounds
yeah.
great. That's wonderful. I'll look forward to seeing you there. That'll be awesome. Well,
Okay, great.
for everyone listening and watching, thank you for listening to Holly's Pandorium. Thank you again to Loyd Auerbach for visiting with us today and having so much good information to share. This was really informative and blast, and I'm going to have to check out some of your books, definitely. Thank you again for coming today, and we'll see you next week, guys. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Holly's Pandorium. If you have stories to share, you can find me on hollyspandorium.com, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and our wonderful Metal Cross Radio at radioking.com. Thanks again for listening. Thank you for listening to Holly's Pandorium. If you have stories to share, you can find me on hollyspandorium.com, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and our wonderful Metal Cross Radio at radioking.com. Thanks again for listening. Thank you for listening to Holly's Pandorium. If you have stories to share, you can find me on hollyspandorium.com, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and our wonderful Metal Cross Radio at radioking.com. Thanks again for listening. Thank you for listening to Holly's Pandorium. If you have stories to share, you can find me on hollyspandorium.com, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and our wonderful Metal Cross Radio at radioking.com. Thanks again for listening.